The Subaru BRZ finally gets big brakes, better tires. Does that fix all of our complaints about it? We're going to find out on track. If you have watched any of our content or read any of our magazine over the last decade or so, you are no doubt aware that we are fans of the Toyota GR86 and the Subaru BRZ. They are a fantastic enthusiast bargain in a modern sports car. There's simply nothing else like them out there on the market. They're a great way to go fast and a great way to get into this hobby. But at the same time, we've also had a lot of very common complaints about weak areas that we think this car displays. You can look at any of our previous content and see that we always have the same criticisms. This is a fantastic chassis in search of the exact right parts to push it over the edge and make it a true factory performance car. And with the TS model, lowercase t, capital S that is, I think Subaru has finally gotten there. A set of Brembo brakes all the way around, 4-piston in the front, 2-piston in the rear, squeezing 12.8-inch discs in the front and 12.4-inch discs in the back. Finally give this car the braking package it deserves. It was embarrassingly under-braked out of the factory in its base guise, and a set of real wheels and tires finally, 18 by 7.5 inch all the way around, with a set of 215/40 Michelin PS4 tires, give it the kind of rubber that a car like this should be coming out of the factory with. So what does all this mean on the road and on the track? Well, first let's talk about what it's going to mean to your pocketbook. Now, along with the performance upgrades, you're also going to get a little bit of a retuned suspension. You're going to get some trim upgrades on this TS model, and you're going to get a little bit higher sticker price, $36,465 MSRP to be exact. That is about $2,650 higher than the model just down the range from it. But if you look at this brake kit and you look at this wheel and tire package, you probably couldn't duplicate this package by buying a base model and adding this brake and wheel and tire package to it. So it does represent a little bit of a decent value when looked at through that lens. And when you think about it, this car does not really have a lot of competition out there. I mean, yeah, you can say the Miata a little bit, but the Miata is a roadster. It doesn't have back seats. It's got a very small trunk. Yes, they appeal to very much the same buyer, but for a closed car with 4 seats with a fairly real trunk that you can actually throw your wheels and tires in if you're going to a track day, kind of sits alone in the marketplace. And the fact that it does it at a little bit of a value, that's pretty impressive as well. Now, under the hood is the same 2.4 liter Boxer engine, puts out 228 horsepower, 184 foot-pounds of torque. But as you'll see when we look at the data a little bit later, the engine's kind of overperforming a little bit. It's really punching above its weight class when it comes to acceleration, especially through a few key areas on track. We'll take a look at that when we look at the data a bit later. Now, I also think that the interior of this current 2024 TS model is the best that any 86 or BRZ has ever had. I think they made some small revisions to the seats this year. It wasn't really in the press materials that there were any major revisions, but the seats felt better to me, both on the road and on the track, than any previous example of this chassis that I have ever driven, as did the seating position. There's really a lot to like here, and these cars have come so far since they were introduced a little bit over a decade ago. They are thoroughly sophisticated drivers' cars now, and with this TS model, really, really highly capable drivers' cars as well. But you've heard all the track tests that we've done on various iterations of this car. The real important thing here is the data, because this TS model has made a quantum leap over previous cars in being far more competitive with some of the cars that it shares a market segment with. So let's take a look at the V-Box data. We, of course, went to our official test track, the Florida International Rally and Motorsports Park in Keystone Heights, took our V-Box HD Mini, and here is all the data. We're going to start off looking at the speed trace here, and the first thing I look for when I look at these speed traces is I look for stuff like these sharp peaks right here. That is a transition between acceleration and braking, and that is about as razor sharp as you're gonna get in any street or race car for that matter. That just absolutely brutal application of the brake and instant deceleration speaks to a fantastic brake kit, which these Brembos certainly have. So all of our braking zones here, whether it be into turn 8 here, whether it be from our highest speed here, a little bit over 105 miles an hour down into the turn 1 area, just fantastic brake application. Something that these cars really have not been known for until they finally got a real brake setup on them. Also, I like to look at this area here, which is the turn 8 complex. Now, turn 8 is actually, it looks like a fairly standard 180 degree big third gear left-hander, but it's actually way more complex than that on the firm. There's actually several camber changes throughout the corner. You actually sort of turn in off camber, it immediately gains camber and sort of catches you with the road. The camber then increases through the middle of the corner before going away again towards the outside of the corner. So that's why you get this speed variation here through what looks like a fairly constant radius corner. So one thing we see in this corner is we look at the difference between your entry speed right here, your mid-corner speed, and your exit speed. Now in everything, your mid-corner speed is always going to be sort of the highest just based on the shape of the corner. Your entry speed and your exit speed are going to be fairly similar because the profile of the road is fairly similar. But the spread here is pretty minimal, which speaks to a very progressive and sort of very predictable breakaway, especially on corner entry. In a lot of cars, you cannot charge the entry quite as hard as you can with this BRZ. And I'm seeing that in that minimal speed drop on turn-in, and that's pretty exciting. That also sort of speaks to the level of confidence that it gives me as the driver to be able to toss that car into that corner. When I see a big speed drop there, that usually means one of two things. It means either the car has a lot of understeer as it hits that sort of unfavorable camber position, or it just doesn't give me a lot of confidence to pound it into a corner that tends to upset the cars and also has a wall towards the outside. But when I see this minimal speed change, I'm looking at a car that gives me a lot of confidence, a lot of great feedback. Let's bring up one of the arch nemeses of the BRZ TS, and that is going to be the Honda Civic Type R. Now, the Civic Type R, in its current iteration, 2024 model, is the reigning sort of small car champion on our test track with a 120.63 second time, whereas the best time of the BRZ TS is a 122.88. Now compare that to the previous time of the BRZ and GR86 that we've tested. They've been up in the 124s and 125. So we are talking about gaining substantial time here. Not quite at that Civic Type R level yet, but let's see how close it's now gotten to the Civic Type R by laying these two curves over top of each other. We can see the blue curve, blue speed trace here. That is going to be the BRZ TS. The red speed trace is the Civic Type R, and the first thing I see here is the big differences tend to be in these acceleration zones, and that is where the Civic is sort of making its hay. Now, 228 horsepower versus almost 320 horsepower for the Civic. That makes a lot of sense. You're talking about a car that is giving up almost 90 horsepower to this Civic, so it does make sense that the Civic is going to out-drag it down these straightaways. But here's what's impressive. Here's what I alluded to earlier, that some of these acceleration zones are closer than you might think, especially through second and third gear. Look at this acceleration coming out of the hairpin. Now here is our acceleration from the slowest point on track. We're looking at 27.6 miles an hour for The Civic, 27.7 miles an hour. For the BRZ, we could actually bring up our minimum speeds here. We can see that the true minimum speeds, 25.47 for the BRZ, 27.06 for the Civic. So about a mile and a half an hour advantage at our bare minimum speed point for the BRZ, but we can see that that's only for a very brief time, as it maybe gathers itself up after a little bit of a bobble in the middle of the hairpin. Anyway, I digress. What's really cool here is look at this acceleration coming out of the hairpin. In second gear, this Civic, this 315 horsepower Civic and a 228 horsepower BRZ are neck and neck through second gear. Even in the beginning of third gear, when both cars shift up, BRZ shifts up a little bit earlier, that first part of pull in third gear, boy, they're way closer than you might think. Now let's also look here coming out of turn 8 in third gear. Yeah, boy, both of these cars sitting way closer on acceleration in that sort of meaty torque part of third gear than you might think. Now, once the Civic, once that turbo spools up, once it gets up into the higher revs, we do see the Civic starting to pull away. In fourth gear here as well, we see it moving on to a much higher terminal speed. Let's look at our terminal speeds, 108 miles an hour versus 105.5 miles an hour. Although for cars that are 90 horsepower apart, that's a lot closer than you might think. So while on paper this BRZ does have a pretty substantial horsepower disadvantage, whatever miracles it's pulling through gearing, through less weight, it is managing to, in some very key areas of the track, kind of hang right there, at least for a while, with the much more powerful Civic Type R. That's pretty impressive. So, Subaru, thank you. A tip of my cap to you for giving this car some of the pieces that it absolutely deserves. These are phenomenally fun to drive cars. They are well balanced. They do all the stuff that you want them doing on track. But out of the showroom, they've really never been up to the potential that these fantastic chassis have. Now, with a better set of brakes, with a better set of tires, they are absolutely phenomenal performers right off the showroom floor, and they still represent a fantastic value in modern sports cars. So, well done, Subaru. Thank you for listening clearly to us and giving this TS model better brakes, better tires, giving it the pieces that it deserved to succeed on track. Hey, folks, if you want to succeed on track and in life and everywhere else, go right down there, click that like button, click that subscribe button, click that bell, and you will get the first crack at all of the content we are posting here on YouTube. And check us out on the web at grassrootsmotorsports.com, where you have access to all of the editorial from the print magazine, all of the editorial that's on the web, and direct contact with other readers like yourself and our staff via our message board. We appreciate you stopping by. We cannot wait to see you next time on track.